The Woody Guthrie Center is an American treasure, venerating one of the most beloved figures in all of American folk history. The Woody Guthrie Center was established around the Woody Guthrie Archive and includes a permanent exhibit commemorating Woody, his achievements, and the early history of folk music in America. Hard Travelin', Woody Guthrie, the Kingston Trio, and the Folk Revival is the Woody Guthrie Center's first effort at creating traveling exhibits. In conjunction with the Kingston Trio Legacy Project, the Grammy Museum, the Woody Guthrie Center has put together the premiere of its traveling exhibit on the Folk Revival, the period in the 1960s and late 50s, which highlighted the rise of folk music in American popular culture. In the era of the 1930s, the Dust Bowl, folk music became the language of the people, became the language of workers, became the language of social change, led by people like Josh White, Woody Guthrie, Burl Ives, Pete Seeger. The 1930s Dust Bowl was led by people like Woody Guthrie, Josh White, Pete Seeger, and other folk luminaries who were champions of the people going through the Great Depression and the people going through the social upheaval, labor unions, etc. It was a time when socialism was in vogue and a time when people like Pete Seeger were leading the movement. World War II brought changes. Not only after World War II did we have a new enemy, the Soviet Union, communism, and extreme socialism, but we had a new spirit in America of intolerance. And this manifested through a variety of acts. Congress, coming down on the McCarthy era, had a tremendous influence on folk music, a stifling influence. Popular groups like the Weavers with Pete Seeger were basically blacklisted, and folk music was seen as something to be suspect. Singers like Harry Belafonte and others kept plying their trade, many in the popular music scene, but folk music had a small but loyal following. This was all to change when the Kingston Trio released Tom Dooley, a simple song, an old North Carolina song from the hills, and the trio was then a force to be reckoned with, both economically and in terms of the power that they wielded in the music industry. A premier act of Capitol Records, the trio featured acoustic instruments, the Martin D28, the Martin tenor guitar, and the Vega banjo. The trio in their signature striped shirts were a fresh face, a happy group, a smart group with smart entertainment. The trio also brought to bear their musical abilities, their percussive abilities, their wit, their charm, and an act honed in the nightclubs of San Francisco and taken to college campuses. The four trio musicians, Dave Guard, Nick Reynolds, Bob Shane, John Stewart were the voice and life of the trio from 1957 to 1967. The trio had a prolific album repertoire. The trio actually at one point had 4 albums in the top 10 on the Billboard charts, a feat that was never again equaled. The exhibit has a video introduction to the trio, but also an audio kiosk where visitors can hear descriptions of the origins of Tom Dooley, the MTA, a medley of their world music, the international and varied repertoire, and also a medley of their social themed music, songs that were contemporary to the times as they were evolving. One of the features of the exhibit are a series of 9 important albums in the trio's discography, and behind each we put the story of the trio and the reasons that the trio was so successful. First, its work ethic, the success of Tom Dooley, the management of Frank Werber, their honing of their act and professionalism in the nightclubs of San Francisco, their creative engineering at Capitol Records with Voyle Gilmore, their bass players who added the bass sound to the trio, the departure of Dave Guard and the arrival of John Stewart, the college phenomenon that the trio became. The time was changing with the Kennedys and the New Frontier, and John's writing brought new and fresh material to the trio. Their controversial album, Time to Think, was one of their most important statements of the social times. And of course, the trio never lost their San Francisco roots, something that the exhibit is keen on showing. In fact, one of the features of the exhibit is a life-size trio walking up the street in San Francisco. Also featured in the exhibit are actual copies of some of the trio's busy schedules, their line of clothing with the patented striped shirts, Nick Reynolds' family ukulele. And as a hint of how important they were becoming, even the Weavers put out an edition, a version of Tom Dooley. This one signed by Pete Seeger and Ronnie Gilbert. The trio sparked the folk revival, a revival that was embodied by folk groups like the Clancy Brothers and Tommy Makem. Here's Tommy's patented sweater and Patty's performance harmonicas. And then, as 1958 morphed into the 1960s, the emergence of other groups stimulated by the economic success of the trio, causing the record companies to promote and foment a folk revival featuring people like Peter, Paul, and Mary, Josh White Jr., and of course, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, Odetta, in a rich treatment of the contributions that these people made to folk music. Folk became the lingua franca. The Greenwich Village influence of people like Dave Van Ronk and others highlighted the impact of folk music on American culture, a culture that was changing with the advent of civil rights, women's movement, and the anti-war movement of the 60s. Songs include We Shall Overcome, song about Woody Guthrie by Bob Dylan, Power and the Glory by Phil Ochs, and Blowing in the Wind by Peter, Paul, and Mary. The revival morphed into other forms of music, folk rock embodied by the Byrds, the Lovin' Spoonful, the Mamas and the Papas, and other exhibits, other groups that came and changed American music yet again. The exhibit will travel from the Woody Guthrie Center to the Grammy Museum, and from there around the country.